My name is Beatrice. I am 68 years old, a retired librarian, and for most of my life, I believed in quiet service. Books, gardens, casseroles for church suppers, and the endless saving of pennies for family. I worked, I mended, I gave. I raised 2 children. One is gone now, my daughter, who left me her boy, Sam. The other is my son, Daniel, who married a woman named Caroline. I thought family meant protection. But then came that birthday afternoon. Caroline had staged it like a pageant. Balloons pressed against the ceiling. A catered cake bigger than my coffee table. The neighbors invited, though none of them ever stopped by otherwise. She loved the performance of generosity. And she saved her sharpest cruelty for that performance too. I still see it. The 3 gift bags lined up on the polished dining table. Inside, the glint of Tesla key fobs, sleek as river stones. She called my 3 grandchildren forward, her children with Daniel. One by one, she pressed the key into their palms. One by one, the room erupted in applause, the sound of champagne flutes colliding, the squeal of disbelief. Cameras flashing, Caroline posing like she was the benefactor of the century. And then there was Sam, my daughter's boy. 14, too tall for his years, still with that awkward gentleness in his shoulders. He waited, smiling small, because he trusted. He thought a 4th bag was coming. But Caroline only turned. Her smile tightened into glass. She laid a hand on his arm and whispered loud enough for every guest to hear. "You're not really part of this family, darling. Not like the others." The words landed heavier than any blow. The room fell into that kind of silence that cuts. Guests glanced at their shoes. Someone coughed into a napkin. Sam's face drained of its boyish color, and in the stillness I heard the cruelest sound of all. The metallic jingle of those new keys, rattling like coins against each other. Sam lowered his eyes and his hand went to his chest. There, hanging by a frayed leather cord, was the silver necklace his mother once wore. A tiny heart, dulled by years. He gripped it so tightly that his knuckles whitened. I wanted to speak. My throat burned, but instead, I held the silence. Because silence, used rightly, is not weakness. Inside my chest, the words repeated like a drum. Silence is not weakness. Silence is choosing your moment. And still, I watched Caroline move on. She turned back to the camera, laughing. She kissed Daniel on the cheek, posed with the children holding their new Tesla keys aloft like trophies. The photographs would tell a story of abundance and belonging. Only Sam, standing in the corner, would be edited out, first in her words, then in memory. But she underestimated me. She thought I was the kind of woman who would swallow it, who would retreat into knitting and nodding politely. What she did not know is that I own the very house she lives in, and within 24 hours, she would no longer be living there for free. That night, while the balloons deflated against the ceiling, I said it with a smile as even as hers had been. "Caroline, you have 24 hours to move out. Family is not a stage, and cruelty is not rent-free." The look on her face then, frozen between disbelief and rage, was the true gift of that birthday. Because that was the moment I understood something. Justice does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as quiet as a key turning in a lock. If you've ever been dismissed, if you've ever watched someone you love humiliated in front of a crowd, you know the weight of silence. Stay with me, and I will tell you what came after. The cost, the reckoning, and the peace. Before I continue, if this story speaks to you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell. It helps bring more stories like this into the light, stories that remind us that quiet does not mean powerless. My name is Beatrice. I am 68, a widow, and I live quietly on the western edge of Denver. Most mornings begin the same way. I set the kettle on low, wipe the rings from last night's cup, and run a cloth across the old oak table my husband built the summer before his heart gave out. The table is scarred in 2 places where he missed with the chisel. I keep those scars polished. They remind me that hands can be steady and human at the same time. When the kettle sighs, I pour black tea, breathe the steam, and listen to the house wake. Floorboards settle. A sparrow taps the screen. Someone 2 streets over starts a truck. It is a small life, but it fits me. I raised 2 children inside these walls. My daughter left me her boy Sam. My son Daniel married a woman named Caroline. Grief and pride live side by side here. On the mantel sits my daughter's school portrait in a modest frame. Below it, a jar of river stones. Sam collected when he was 10. He keeps one in his pocket most days. He says the smoothness calms his breath when the world goes jagged. The house carries our effort. My husband set the thresholds an inch higher than standard. He liked the feel of stepping up and in, as if every doorway were a promise to cross with intention. I still catch myself pausing there. The front door, the mudroom door, the door to the room where Sam sleeps when he stays over. Each pause is a choice. In or out. Speak or hold. Keep or release. Daniel's family crosses these thresholds often. When his kitchen was being remodeled, I offered our guest suite. Caroline called it temporary. She liked to keep her shoes by the door and her purse on the chair nearest the table, the one with the best light. She said the light made her feel productive. I said nothing. Hospitality was the language I learned young. It is difficult to unlearn a language you have spoken your whole life. Sam arrives before school on the days his bus route runs early. He pours milk too fast and wipes the spill with his sleeve, then laughs at himself. He wears a silver necklace that belonged to his mother. The chain is a little worn, the pendant a small heart that has dulled to pewter. When he forgets it on the table, I set it back in the wooden dish by the door so he will see it as he leaves. A necklace should belong on a heartbeat. I keep my paperwork in the bottom drawer of the sideboard, behind the tea towels, deeds and tax receipts. The old mortgage stamped satisfied. The power of attorney I signed during a winter of fear when my husband's speech slurred for a week. He recovered. The paper remained. I told myself it was practical. In truth, it was habit. Women in my family were raised to trust first and ask questions later. We were told that questions sounded like doubt, and doubt sounded ungrateful. The yard is modest. In spring, I coax herbs from a narrow bed along the fence. In summer, the tomatoes push their cages apart. In autumn, the cottonwoods drop their coins on the lawn, and I rake until my shoulders ache. Sam helps when he is here. He rakes like a boy learning patience, in short, determined bursts. He stacks leaves into a mound and falls backward into them, then sits up and apologizes for the mess. I tell him mess is not a crime. Sometimes mess is a season. On Thursdays, I volunteer at the thrift store 2 blocks down. I steam collars and straighten the book aisle. There is a copy of a gardening encyclopedia that has been there for months. I open it to the section on pruning and read a paragraph while the steamer warms. Pruning, it says, is a mercy for the plant because it stops the old growth from stealing light from the new. I whisper that sentence to myself on the walk home. Some truths need the air before they can live inside you. Daniel calls most afternoons. Work is fine. The kids are fine. Caroline is busy. His voice lifts when he mentions a new client, drops when I ask about Sam's art show. He says he will try to attend next time. I say next time is not a season. Next time is a decision. He chuckles like I have made a joke and says he will call me tomorrow. In the evenings, I set my cup on the table, open the album, and let the pages slow my breathing. There is my daughter at 11 with grass stains on her knees. There is Daniel at 5 holding the first tomato he ever picked. There is my husband lifting a door on its hinges with the ease of a man who trusted wood and gravity. I stop on a page where Sam stands on this very threshold, 1 foot in shadow, 1 foot in light. He is grinning at the camera. I trace the place where the light meets him and think about doors, how they keep weather out and warmth in, how they also invite both to trade places when you are ready. Daniel has his father's gentle eyes. His spine leans toward the nearest weather vane, and too often that vane is Caroline. He is a good man at his core, the boy who returned a lost wallet with every dollar inside. The young father who learned to braid Lily's hair so she would not feel out of place on picture day. When conflict rises, though, he trims his sentences until they are safe. He says he is keeping the peace. I hear the wobble and know he is keeping approval. Caroline speaks in compliments that steer. She thanks the server, tips generously, sponsors the school fair, then ranks people by pedigree as if she were sorting wine. Bloodline is a word she loves, spoken lightly like a toast. She says it around me as if it were a virtue rather than a cage. She says it around Sam as if it were data rather than a knife. Her calendar is color-coded. Her stories are edited. She calls our arrangement temporary housing, while Daniel's kitchen is remodeled. She calls the rent discussion a later matter. She moves easily through rooms she does not pay for, as if graciousness were currency. My grandchildren with Daniel arrive as a trio, bright and practiced. Ethan is the eldest, steady, a goalkeeper who scans angles even when choosing a seat. He notices the exits before he notices the cookies. Lily carries a camera and an opinion about light. She photographs her breakfast and calls it discipline. Mark has the fast answers. He can fix a router and a mood in under 5 minutes, then loses patience with anyone who cannot match his speed. They are good kids. Their edges are polished by resources and praise, by camps and coaches who assume they belong. Sam stands beside them like a quiet hymn beside a marching song. He listens with his whole face. He wins art ribbons he forgets to mention. While the others present projects with bullet points, Sam spreads charcoal and lifts a horizon. He paints silence without naming it. He sweeps the porch without being asked, then asks if the broom is too harsh for the old steps. When Lily shows him how to frame a shot, he turns her toward the backyard fence where the wood has silvered. He says the light there tells the truth. The hairline cracks arrived as tiny remarks. Caroline praised Ethan's scholarship letter while calling Sam's art elective an easy A. She joked that talent skips branches of a tree. At Thanksgiving, she toasted legacy and peered at Mark's jawline to admire the family stamp. She told me Lily has my stubborn chin. She said it sweetly, then squeezed my shoulder as if the compliment might file down what she meant by stubborn. When Sam stepped onto the porch to steady his breath, she murmured that some children feel more like guests than kin. I did not scold. I watched the room tilt. The children patterned around her like planets around a sun that made its own laws. Daniel moved in loops, checking the roast, adding chairs. He avoided the gravity of words. When I asked later whether Sam seemed quieter, he said, "Teenagers go tidal." He said not to read into it. I stirred tea and let the steam ask me a question I did not want to answer. The table steadied my hands. The threshold kept count of who crossed and who stalled. Meanwhile, Caroline kept shoes by the door and boxes in the hallway. Her company name arrived on glossy packages as if my address were a showroom. She repainted the guest room a color she called stone to neutralize the light for video calls. She said a neutral room photographs as authority. She offered to cover a token amount for utilities, then forgot the offer, the way people forget umbrellas in clear weather. Daniel promised to revisit rent after the remodel. The remodel gathered delays like lint on a dark coat. In practice, she lived here for free and called it temporary, with a smile that suggested generosity ran one direction. On Saturday mornings, the 4 children sprawled on the rug while Caroline planned their schedules. Debate camp, robotics scrimmage, leadership seminar. Sam sat among them, sketchbook on his knees, drawing the others as they argued over time slots. He drew Ethan as a tower, Lily as a lens, Mark as a map. I glanced over his shoulder and saw that he had drawn himself as a door ajar. Light rested along the hinge. He said doors want to move. They wait for permission. He said it softly, as if asking the room for consent to breathe. Caroline overheard and smiled. "Some doors," she said, "are purely decorative. They are not meant to open." She reached for her planner and turned the page as if that settled the matter. I marked the sentence in my mind with a red pencil only I could see. The house felt a degree colder, though the thermostat had not changed. The threshold creaked when I crossed it, and the table my husband made seemed to ask whether a good surface must tolerate every weight placed upon it. I polished the scars on that wood and felt the answer arrive like a draft under a closed door. The morning of that birthday began with a balloon squeal and the hum of a garage door. I had tied 3 blue balloons to my car mirror before driving over, knowing they would tangle in the wind, but not minding. Caroline had organized the party with her usual efficiency. She sent a playlist link, color-coded who would bring what, and even texted me a reminder that Costco cakes freeze well. When I pulled into Daniel's driveway, the garage door yawned open to reveal folding tables, a cooler full of soda, and Ethan setting up speakers, while Mark tested the bass with a grin that shook the driveway. Sam rode with me. He had been quiet during the drive, his sketchbook balanced on his knees, fingers smudged with graphite. At one red light, I saw him slip a photo of his mother into the front sleeve of an old album. It was not dramatic, just a practiced gesture, the way you smooth a page. The photo was of her holding him as a baby, a summer lake in the background, her hair caught by wind. He didn't say a word, just kept adjusting until it sat flat behind the plastic. My throat tightened. Caroline had insisted this would be a proper celebration, her word for everything she orchestrated. Streamers in metallic silver draped from the ceiling. The cake was 3 layers, frosted with the initials of each of Daniel's children, letters piped in blue and gold. I asked about including Sam's initial. Caroline smiled quickly, said the baker had already finalized the order. "But of course we can add a candle for him," she added, as though that were an afterthought sufficient to balance the ledger. Inside the house, The smell of barbecue mingled with the sweetness of buttercream. Lily flitted from room to room with her camera, capturing angles, balloons tied to banisters, the reflection of ice cubes in a punch bowl, the way the sunlight sliced across Daniel's dining table. She called it documentary work, said she wanted to tell the story of family through images. I caught her lens pausing on Sam, who sat in the corner adjusting the album. She didn't click the shutter. She tilted the camera away, almost apologetically. I paused at the threshold of Daniel's front door. That threshold has always felt like a test. I stood with balloons tugging against my wrist, hearing the chatter inside, and for a heartbeat, I considered leaving the gifts in the car and returning home. The table my husband built awaited me there, with its dependable scars and steady grain. But I swallowed the loneliness that rose, straightened my shoulders, and crossed. My shoes made no sound on the entry rug. Daniel met me with a kiss on the cheek, his eyes tired but kind. "You made it," he said, as though there were any doubt. I handed him a plate of deviled eggs, still warm from my kitchen. He smiled with relief. He had forgotten to assign anyone that task. His gratitude reminded me of the boy he once was, the one who relied on me to remember his science projects. As I stepped into the kitchen, Caroline brushed past, her phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing softly, but her free hand clutched a folder against her side. A white envelope slid halfway out, marked with the bold print of a credit union. I caught the words, "loan agreement," before she tucked it back quickly, her eyes flicking up to mine with a smile too swift, too polished. Then she pivoted, announcing that the grill was ready and that Ethan should fetch his friends from the yard. The moment closed like a curtain. Sam stayed near me, turning pages of the album. The photo of his mother glowed against the plastic sleeve. He placed it beside a picture of the other children in Halloween costumes, as if to argue silently for her presence in this lineage. My hand brushed his shoulder. He did not look up, but he leaned into the touch, just slightly. Later, as the garage filled with music, Daniel clapped me on the back and said, "It feels good to have everyone together." He meant well, but I watched Caroline position herself by the cake, orchestrating the order of gifts, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm as she whispered schedules. I noticed how the children orbited her commands, and I saw Sam standing apart, his album closed but held firmly, as if it were the only gift he was sure of receiving. The threshold scene stayed with me, that hesitation outside the door, the urge to retreat. I told myself it was just fatigue, but somewhere I knew it was foreshadow, the kind of pause before a storm when the air tastes of metal. I crossed anyway, because love compels you forward, even when instinct warns. That night, after balloons sagged and paper plates piled, I would remember the envelope peeking out from her folder and the weight of Sam's album on his knees. I did not yet know how those two images, paper and photo, debt and memory, would braid themselves into the unraveling of our family's story. The moment unspooled like slow motion, though in truth it took less than a minute. The garage was full of chatter, plates balanced on laps, music humming from the speakers. Caroline stood near the cake table with that bright hostess smile she wore like a crown. She clapped her hands to gather attention, her bracelets clinking against each other. Everyone hushed, waiting. From behind the curtain of streamers, she produced a velvet pouch. "We have a surprise," she announced, her voice sweet as frosting. She drew out a key fob with the Tesla logo gleaming silver. Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan's mouth dropped open. Caroline placed the fob into his hand with a flourish. "For all your hard work at school, darling. You earned it." Applause rose. Children cheered. Camera flashes went off. Then came the second fob. This one handed to Lily, who squealed and hugged her stepmother tight. "Thank you, thank you," she cried, bouncing with joy. The third fob went to Mark, who strutted like a rooster, dangling the key for his friends to see. Then silence. 3 fobs given, 3 bows tied, 3 smiles received. The pouch was empty. Sam stood frozen, the album still tucked under his arm. His lips parted slightly, confusion knitting his brow. He stepped forward, just 1 pace. His voice was small but steady. "Where's mine?" The words floated above the laughter, landing with the weight of a stone in still water. The chatter stalled. Forks paused in midair. My breath locked in my chest. Caroline did not falter. She turned, her smile unchanged, her tone smooth. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her hand fluttering to her chest. "You're not really part of this family, not in the same way. This was for Daniel's children. Bloodline gifts, you understand." The air cracked. Every sound vanished except the metallic jingle of the 3 fobs striking against each other as the cousins clutched them in their fists. Sam's shoulders stiffened, his hand flying to the silver chain around his neck, the necklace his mother had given him before she died. His knuckles whitened as he held onto it like a lifeline. I wanted to speak, to tear the words from Caroline's mouth and hurl them back at her, but my voice betrayed me. Nothing came out. Silence stretched, the kind of silence that sears more than any scream. Daniel coughed into his hand, shifting uncomfortably. "Caroline," he murmured, forcing a laugh that landed flat. "That was a slip. You didn't mean it that way." He glanced at me, his eyes pleading for me to smooth it over. He wanted this to dissolve like sugar in tea. But Sam looked directly at him. "She meant it," he whispered. His eyes glistened, not from tears yet, but from a clarity children should never have to carry. I could no longer stand still. I reached for Sam, guiding him away from the crowd, past the balloons, past the empty punch bowl. We slipped into the small bathroom at the edge of the hallway. The door clicked shut, muffling the party's noise, though echoes of laughter and clinking glasses bled through like ghosts. Sam's chest rose and fell quickly, his jaw tight. He clutched the necklace, the chain digging into his skin. I knelt before him, my hands on his shoulders. The mirror above the sink reflected our faces, his pale with hurt, mine with fury barely contained. "Listen to me," I said softly, forcing my voice to steady. "You are not wrong. You are not less. Do you hear me?" He blinked, a tear sliding down his cheek. "But she said—" I cupped his face, gently wiping the tear away. "What she said is about her, not about you. You belong. You always will. Your mother loved you more than anything, and I do too. That is family. That is what counts." He nodded faintly, though the wound was fresh and raw. His small hand reached for mine, gripping tightly. In that dim little bathroom, under the flicker of an aging light bulb, I wrapped my arms around him. We stayed there, cocooned in silence. And in that silence, I felt something shift. It was not weakness, not defeat. It was a seed, anger, grief, and resolve twined together. Silence was my weapon now. I would not shout across the party or argue with Caroline in front of witnesses. I would wait, watch, and choose my moment. Sam leaned against me, his breath slowing. "Grandma," he whispered, "don't let her take me away." "I won't," I answered, my voice quiet but firm as steel. "No one can take you from me." We stayed until the noise outside swelled again, signaling the cake was being cut. When we stepped back into the light, the garage sparkled with balloons and laughter, as though nothing had happened. But I carried the truth inside me. A cut had been made, invisible but deep, and I knew it would not heal without consequence. That night, the house was hushed, the kind of quiet that hums louder than any sound. The party had ended hours ago, balloons already sagging on their strings in Daniel's garage, frosting hardening on paper plates. I sat with Sam on the wooden porch outside my home, the boards worn smooth by years of footsteps. The crickets sang in the grass, and the air smelled faintly of pine and cooling asphalt. Sam sat beside me, his knees drawn up to his chest, his small fingers tracing the grain of the wood, as though reading a language only he could understand. He broke the silence first. His voice was low, tremulous, yet deliberate. "Grandma," he asked, eyes fixed on the dark yard, "am I less?" Was she right? My heart clenched at the question, sharper than any knife. "Why would you think that, sweetheart?" "Because she said I'm not part of the family. Because I don't have a car key and I don't have a dad, and maybe I'm just not enough." The words fell into the night like stones into a well, deep and heavy. I turned toward him, but before I could speak, a memory surged unbidden. I saw my daughter, his mother, standing in the schoolyard decades ago, her face crumpled as she told me through tears that a teacher had compared her to Daniel. "He's brighter, more promising," they had said. I had watched her shrink under the weight of someone else's measure, her spirit dimming at an age when it should have burned the brightest. That night long ago, I had made a promise to her, a vow whispered into her hair as I rocked her in my arms. "You will never stand alone, not while I have breath." She had been so young then, so unsure of her place, and though she grew, struggled, and finally left me too soon, that vow had not died. It had merely shifted to the child she left behind. I placed my arm around Sam's shoulders, pulling him close until I could feel the beat of his small heart against my side. "Listen to me carefully," I said. "You are not less. You are not broken. You are mine, and you are your mother's. And both of us know your worth." His eyes shimmered as he looked up at me. The moonlight caught the silver necklace on his chest, the tiny charm his mother had given him before her last hospital stay. He touched it unconsciously, waiting for my words to anchor him. "Family isn't blood alone," I continued, my voice steady despite the ache in my throat. "Family is where you are seen, where you are loved without condition. That's what she meant for you to have, and that's what I will fight to give you." Sam swallowed, his lips pressing together as if he wanted to believe but feared to hope. "Promise?" he whispered. I kissed the crown of his head. "Promise." Later, after I'd tucked him into bed, I lingered in the living room. On the mantel sat a framed photo of my daughter, her gentle eyes, her wide smile, the one dimple only Sam had inherited. I lit a candle, shielding the match from the draft until the flame caught. The wick glowed, casting a soft light across her face in the photograph. I sat in the armchair, hands folded in my lap. No words of scripture rose to my lips, only the raw, human kind of prayer that is closer to breath than to doctrine. "I failed you once," I whispered to her picture. I let the world convince you that you were less than your brother, less than worthy. I cannot change that, but I will not fail your son. I will not let him carry the same wound. He will know he belongs. He will know he is enough. The candle flickered, its flame bowing and rising like it understood. Outside, the wind rattled the porch chimes, a low, mournful sound. I leaned forward, pressing my palm to the cool glass of the frame, as if touching her cheek one more time. I made you a promise, and tonight I renew it, I whispered. I will protect him. I will give him a place where he is seen. That is what family means. The flame steadied, its light holding fast against the dark. I stayed there until the wax began to pool, until the silence wrapped me like a shroud and a shield. And though grief ached in my bones, resolve coiled beside it, fierce and unyielding. When I finally blew out the candle, the smoke curled upward like a vow carried into the night. At 3 a.m, the house held its breath. The clock on the stove blinked 3 o'clock. The kettle lid ticked as it cooled, and the sideboard drawer slid open with a small wooden sigh. I laid papers across my husband's oak table: deed, tax receipts, a manila envelope that still smelled like bank air, and the power of attorney I signed during his worst winter. I set a pencil on the right. I like a tool that points forward. Checking statements first. I traced the familiar debits with a fingertip: utilities, insurance, the library donation. Then an entry I did not recognize: a transfer to a company with a clean tech name, followed by a monthly service fee that matched the fast charge rate Caroline once bragged about. Another line: a premium to a luxury auto insurer. The memo read EV policy. I sat back. You do not need a law degree to follow a money trail. You only need light and patience. Equity statements, next. Cold moved through me like a draft under a door. A home equity line of credit had been opened last year. My house pledged as collateral. My name listed as owner and borrower. I had not signed at a branch. I had signed a POA at my kitchen table when Daniel said it would help if I ever fell or forgot. I never fell. I did not forget. But I had handed him a key. A note in the file referenced improvements: new appliances, energy upgrades, parking solution. My kitchen had not changed. My roof had not changed. The only new thing with wheels sat in someone else's driveway, and 3 key fobs had been raised like trophies an hour earlier. At the back of the folder, an email printout smiled up at me. Carolyn's voice in black and white. Please confirm disbursement for delivery. We want the kids' surprise to land on the same Saturday. Thank you for expediting. I pressed my palm flat on the table until the grain steadied me. Grief drags. Anger clarifies. Anger said, pick up the phone. I dialed a number I had not used since the funeral. Edgar Flynn had fished with my husband and argued quietly for him in probate. A careful man who smelled faintly of cedar. He answered on the second ring. I apologized for the hour and did not apologize for the reason. He said he had learned to trust the emergencies of quiet women. They rarely called about nothing. I read him the lines: the POA, the HELOC, the payments that turned fuel into hierarchy. He asked precise questions: any change of mailing address, any notarized signatures on file, whether I still had original deeds in my possession. Yes, yes, yes. He asked if Daniel had ever used the POA for my benefit. Number. He asked if I felt safe. I looked at the curtained windows, the album on the shelf, the lamp pooling its small circle of daylight at midnight. Yes, I said, safety is not the same as surrender. Edgar's plan was disciplined. Freeze draws immediately. Notify the bank of potential misuse under power of attorney authority. Meet at 9 to prepare revocation and to evaluate remedies under Colorado statute. He believed conflict of interest would carry weight. Photograph every page. Keep originals. Write the date and hour on a yellow legal pad as I went. Let the papers do the talking. I hung up and made tea. Binder clips, sticky notes, labels, a small army lined along the table's edge. I wrote neat captions in pencil: trust, deed, insurance, loan. I tucked the photo album into the stack, then set it aside again. The album was not evidence. It was the reason. I kept it within reach, like a hand on my shoulder. At 4, the refrigerator hummed. A truck down the block coughed awake. I slid everything into a canvas grocery bag. It is the only briefcase I own. I dropped my keys into the pocket. The sound they made, plain, certain, felt like rehearsal for another set I intended to reclaim. When the clock reached 5, I slept in the chair for an hour, lamp still on, pencil still pointing forward. I woke without drama, only resolve, level, and exact. Before I stood, I dated each note in the margin and photographed every signature twice. I wrote one sentence across the top sheet as a promise to myself. Family is where you are seen. Today, the paperwork will see us. Clearly. Edgar's office sits above a barber shop that still takes cash and gives peppermints with change. The stairs creaked like loyal witnesses as I climbed, canvas bag against my hip. He met me at the door in a jacket and a tie that might have been green once. He always dressed like the law was a library. He cleared a space on his desk, set down a yellow legal pad, and let me unpack my night onto the wood. He read in silence, the way a careful reader reads a novel, checking the first page for foreshadow, the last page for motive, the middle for where the truth bent. When he finished, he capped his pen and spoke to me as if we were teammates rather than a client and her attorney. "You are not crazy," he said, "and you are not petty. This is harm. We will use paper to lift the weight." He began with the power of attorney. He typed a revocation that was unambiguous. Effective immediately, notice to Daniel by certified mail and hand delivery. He added a paragraph about conflicts and fiduciary duty, words built like braces to hold a spine straight. He drafted letters to the bank. Freeze all draws. Review signatures. Flag the account for supervisory oversight. He copied me on everything, insisting that the file belonged to me again. Next came the structure I had avoided for years because it felt like hubris, a revocable living trust. He listed the house, the small savings, the insurance. He moved titles and beneficiaries like a mason moves stones, deliberate, always considering load. I named myself as trustee and, in case of incapacity, a neutral successor from the firm, instead of family. Not because I did not love my son, Edgar said gently, but because I loved him too much to tempt him with power he could mistake for duty. Specific gifts, the album to Sam, the tools to Daniel if he wished them, the rest to the trust. He had me initial every page, then sat back and let me breathe. Then we turned to the house. Technically, Caroline was a guest. Legally, she was a month-to-month occupant without consideration. Edgar opened a template and built a notice to vacate that was clean, 30 days for Daniel's household, but he underlined a clause that named Caroline separately. If Daniel wished to remain, he could. If he wished to visit, he would be welcomed. The door stayed open for my son. It did not stay open for her. Boundary as kindness, boundary as consequence. He asked what outcome I wanted. I told him no courtroom, no shouting, no scene to feed on. I wanted my house back and my grandson's steadiness restored. I wanted Daniel to choose with clear eyes instead of slipping on the oil of someone else's certainty. Edgar nodded and said the law could not heal a heart, but it could stop a leak long enough for healing to begin. We signed in blue ink. The notary's stamp thumped. Edgar walked me through the steps like a pilot talking a nervous passenger through turbulence. Certified mail today. Sheriff's office for service tomorrow if needed. Bank calls scheduled for this afternoon with me on the line. He folded each document into its own envelope and wrote labels so I would reach for the right one when the moment came. On the way out, I paused at his window. Below us, the barber spun a chair. Hair drifted like soft weather. I thought about the sentence I had whispered to the photograph the night before. Family is where you are seen. For years, I had mistaken politeness for peace, tolerance for love, patience for duty. That was my old thesis. The evidence had changed. The new one arrived clean and stern. Love without a boundary becomes permission for harm. Today, I would choose a different kind of peace. Edgar opened the door and pressed a peppermint into my hand as if I were a child leaving a hard appointment. He said, "Call me if anyone raises their voice. I will lend you mine." I thanked him. On the stairs, the wood creaked again, but this time it sounded like affirmation instead of warning. I tucked the envelopes into my bag, felt their corners like anchors against my side, and stepped into the noon sun, ready to let the papers speak for me. Nora Whitaker caught me on the sidewalk the next morning while I was carrying a bag of envelopes and a head full of instructions. She runs the neighborhood thrift store, a narrow place that smells like starch and orange oil. We exchange hello most Thursdays when I steam collars. She looked at my face and did not ask the wrong question. She simply said, "We could use an extra pair of hands today." And I heard the offer underneath the sentence. Come stand with people who understand salvage. I walked with her. The bell over the door chimed, soft and domestic. Racks leaned under wool coats and wedding dresses that had already promised once. On the counter sat a tin-labeled coffee fund in neat handwriting. Nora handed me a steamer and a short list. Sort blouses by size. Set aside anything with a moth hole. Bring out a cart of paperbacks when you need a break. Her voice was the temperature of afternoon shade. By 10, the back room had filled with a circle of women I recognized by sight, but not by story. Irene, hair silver and cropped. May, taller than me with a cane she treated like punctuation. Pilar, a nurse's aide who rolled the sleeves of every shirt to check for stains, because she said dignity begins at the cuff. Widows, most of them. A few divorced. All of them keepers of houses emptied too soon. They talked while their hands worked. The cost of insulin. The new bus schedule. A grandchild's stubborn spelling list. No one asked for a speech. Yet everyone listened as if one might arrive. Sam drifted in from school a little after lunch, sketchbook under his arm. He had texted me that the art room was closed for repairs. Could he help at the store? Nora smiled and waved him to the folding table. He sharpened 2 pencils and looked up with the courteous nod he saves for grown women who remind him of teachers. Then he began to draw. He moved quietly between us, pausing as Irene held a lace collar against her throat, as May tried on a hat tilted just so, as Pilar ironed a stubborn hem. He asked permission before he turned a page. He thanked each woman for letting him capture her. I watched his face ease as he worked. The tightness around his mouth softened. His shoulders dropped. Art returns breath to a child before language can. When he finished the first sketch, he placed the pad on the table for them to see. Irene put her palm on the paper without touching the graphite. "It is like someone remembered me," she said, and her voice trembled once, then steadied. We made tea in chipped mugs. Someone unwrapped lemon cookies. Someone else told a joke about a rooster who forgot Sundays. Between the laughter, the stories slipped out the way we exhale between tasks. They did not speak like victims. They spoke like weather reporters. This is the system. Here's the storm. Here is our stance. Nora touched my elbow when the room thinned. She said, "You have the look of a woman who is about to shift a house with paper." I smiled, because she was not wrong. She nodded toward Sam, who was adding a wash of shadow with the side of his pencil. "That boy is being seen here," she said. "Sometimes the right room is all the miracle we get." I told her a piece of what had happened. Not the whole knife, just the edge. Her mouth drew into a line I recognized from mirrors. She said blood can be a blessing and a bully. Both know the door by heart. Then she handed me a stack of donation receipts and asked if I would write the dates while she labeled a shelf. The ordinary work steadied me the way kneeling steadies prayer. Before we left, Sam asked each woman to sign the margin of her portrait. May laughed, said she had not signed anything important since her mortgage in 1982. Pilar kissed his cheek and told him artists keep families together in ways pastors cannot. Irene pressed the tin of coffee money into his hand and said to buy a proper eraser. He tried to refuse. She insisted. Nora winked at me over his shoulder. On the walk home, Sam carried the portfolio like a bakery box, careful and proud. He said, "They were kind to me." I said, "They recognized themselves in you. Chosen family looks like that. It gathers around usefulness, tenderness, and tasks." The wind came up along the block and rattled a loose sign. We turned our collars into it and kept walking. A boy with drawings, a woman with envelopes, both of us lighter than we had been in the morning. Daniel came by after work, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. I had set 2 mugs on the kitchen table, black tea for me, coffee for him. The papers were stacked in a tidy fan beside the salt shaker, binder clip squared. He glanced at the pile and smiled. "What's all this, Mom?" "Light," I said, "and clarity." I slid the bank statements across. He skimmed, his mouth tilted into what he thought was reassurance. "These are transfers for household upgrades. Caroline handled the logistics. You know she is organized. The fast charging plan is under the same account to simplify auto pay." I tapped the equity statement with my pencil. A home equity line of credit was opened against my house. The draws matched the delivery dates for 3 electric cars. He shrugged, the way men shrug when hoping gravity will drop the subject. It was temporary. The dealership needed a deposit while my bonus cleared. We will pay it down next quarter. You know Caroline only wants the best for the kids. The best never requires a secret, I said. I opened the manila envelope and laid the POA on top. The ink clean. "This was meant for my emergencies, not your conveniences. I revoked it this morning." He reeled and tried a laugh he did not believe. "You revoked it, without asking me. Mom, that feels extreme." He glanced at the back door. The threshold held. I did not move. He rubbed his temple, breathing slow. "What feels extreme," I answered, "is my house pledged without my knowledge. What feels extreme is watching your nephew shrink because he was told he is not family, while the bill for that declaration lands on my table." Daniel's jaw set. I recognized the stubborn line he wore at 16. Caroline misspoke. She was excited. She meant no harm. The keys were a celebration. You are reading malice into generosity. "Generosity does not require collateral from a widow," I said, "nor does love sort children by pedigree." I slid a pen toward him. It stopped against his knuckles. "You may remain here as my son. You may not remain here as my agent. Those are different doors." He stared at the pen as if it could translate. "You are making me choose." "I am asking you to see," I said. "That is all I ever asked." Silence pressed into the room. The clock ticked with courtroom patience. He folded the statements and unfolded them. He avoided my eyes. "I will talk to Caroline. We will fix the account. This is a misunderstanding." "It is a pattern," I said, "and I have set a boundary. The bank is notified. The draws are frozen. The notice is prepared." His pride flushed. Hurt rose, loud as a siren he would not name. He stood. His chair scraped the floor. At the back door, he hesitated. The threshold again. "I wish you had trusted me." "I wanted you to trust yourself," I said gently. "There is still time." The call came mid-morning while I was labeling envelopes. The number on my screen was the school. My stomach dropped. The counselor's voice was practiced calm. She said Sam had skipped lunch, sat in the library turning pages without reading, missed an English assignment. Could we check in? I thanked her, agreed to stop by after dismissal, and wrote her name on a sticky note. When I hung up, the house felt too still. I wiped the same spot on the table twice, then went to Sam's backpack. He had left it near the couch the way boys do when their thoughts are heavier than their habits. I unzipped it and found his sketchbook between a chemistry notebook and a crumpled robotics flyer. I carried the sketchbook to the window. The paper had a tooth that caught the morning. Charcoal dust filmed my fingers. Landscapes first, a river field, the corner of our porch with the broom leaning like a tired soldier. Then the new drawing he had not shown me. My breath hitched. He had drawn the party as a pane of glass. Inside the garage, 3 cousins lifted sleek key fobs that reflected light like small moons. In the reflections, you could see Caroline's bright face, Daniel's careful smile. A crowd softened into pleasant shapes. Outside, the glass stood a boy with a necklace pressed to his chest. The glass split the page left to right, a hard horizon that would not move. He shaded the inside with soft strokes. Balloons bobbed in careful arcs. The outside he crosshatched with tight lines. Near the bottom edge, he had written, very small, where only someone searching would see it. Maybe I don't belong. The letters were straight. He had pressed hard enough to dent the page. Something had been erased underneath. A faint ghost curved away like smoke. I tipped the paper toward the light until the ghost surrendered. It had said, "Maybe I should leave." I sat down and kept the book open. I traced the line where the glass divided the page. Charcoal bled and smudged my skin. You can tell how long a child fought with a picture by the scars it leaves. Along the edge lay grooves where he had tried a softer pencil, then a darker one. The eraser had pilled and torn. He had pressed again anyway. Persistence looks like hope even when it aches. When Sam came home, he saw the open sketchbook and flinched. I met his eyes and nodded once, as if we stood at a road sign. I said his name, the way you say a password you will not forget. He sat. He slid closer. He put his finger on the glass line and waited. I said quietly that doors open, glass breaks, families learn, and until they do, he belongs on my side, fully seen. He did not smile. He breathed, and for that hour, the breath was enough. Caroline came through the mudroom door at dusk, phone to her ear, laughter like polished metal. I was at the table with a cup of black tea. The documents were stacked on the oak like a patient verdict. Deed on top, bank letters beneath, the revocation clipped with blue. "Busy day," she said brightly. "I hope the plumber finally called you back." "The drip is handled," I answered. I slid the top folder toward her. "So are a few other leaks." She opened the folder with a practiced flip. Her eyes moved. Her smile did not. "What is this?" "Ownership," I said. "Authority. And a boundary." I folded my hands and kept my voice kind. "You have 24 hours to move out of my house." She laughed. Be serious." Daniel and I are in the middle of a remodel. The kids have soccer. My filming schedule is packed. 30 days at least. I shook my head. "You are not a tenant. You are a guest who has abused hospitality. You will pack tonight and tomorrow. After that, the locks change." Her chin lifted. "You would not dare." I sipped tea. This is not a dare. It is a decision. I am done financing my own erasure. You spent my home's equity to crown your children in public while telling my grandson he did not belong. In this house, belonging is not purchased. It is practiced. She flipped to the bank letter, then to the revocation. "You revoked Daniel's authority. You blindsided him." I protected what was placed in my care. Daniel is welcome to remain, to visit, to heal. You are not. Family is where people are seen. You made a spectacle instead. Her voice sharpened. "You are punishing success. Those cars were inspirational. The kids need role models. You have always thought small." "I have always thought human," I said. "And the human in front of you is a 14-year-old who believed he was loved. He is my line in the sand." She stood. The purse strap scraped the chair. "Daniel will not allow this." "The bank has already allowed it," I said. I pushed the deed forward so the seal caught the lamplight. "The sheriff will serve papers if necessary. You may leave with dignity, or you may leave with a witness." She stared at the seal, then at me. She tried another angle. The porch light clicked on, and moths circled the glass slowly. "Think of appearances." I am," I said. "I am thinking of the boy who will look at this door and know it guards him." We held each other's gaze. Then she gathered the folder, not to keep, but to understand that keeping was over. "Fine," she said. 24 hours. "Thank you," I answered. I rose and took my cup to the sink. No triumph, only relief. The tea had cooled. I poured it out and turned off the light. Behind me, the door closed. The threshold held. The house exhaled. That night, the house was still except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stood at the sink, rinsing my teacup. The warm water steamed against my hands, but inside I felt cold. A tear slipped before I could stop it, dropping into the basin. I watched it mingle with the suds and vanish. Another followed, then another. No sobs, just the quiet ache of being stretched between love and loss. I asked myself, am I cutting off my son? The thought bruised. I had always been the buffer, the one who forgave too quickly. Tonight I had drawn a line, and in doing so, I feared I had split myself as well. I dried my hands, went to the table, and pulled out a sheet of stationery. In careful script, I wrote a letter to Daniel. I told him I loved him since the day he was born, that I had wanted his life to be easier than mine. I told him boundaries were not punishments, but doorways to honesty. I admitted that I missed the boy who used to run in from baseball practice, cheeks flushed, asking what was for dinner. When the ink dried, I folded the page and slipped it inside the family album, between photographs of his 10th birthday and his high school graduation. A letter not to be sent, but to be held. A bridge, waiting for his step. The next morning, Caroline turned her fire outward. She whispered to Daniel that I was unstable, that grief had warped me into cruelty. She dialed cousins and aunts, spinning the story of a tyrant matriarch too rigid to bend. At one point, I overheard her mutter on the phone, "She's an old woman clinging to control." Then came the heavier blow, a call to Adult Protective Services. She hinted I was vulnerable, mismanaging finances, perhaps confused. The thought stung, but I welcomed the visit. When the caseworker arrived, I offered coffee at my tidy kitchen table. She glanced at the stacks, organized bills, clear trust documents, letters from my attorney clipped neatly. The cupboards were stocked, the floors swept, the medicine sorted. The woman smiled softly and closed her folder. "You're fine, Mrs. Whitaker. More than fine." Caroline, standing nearby, reddened and bit her lip. For all her bravado, her fear was plain. If she lost the family line she had built her authority upon, she lost her crown. I didn't gloat. I simply walked the caseworker to the door, thanked her, and went back to my tea. Paperwork had become my shield, and dignity my armor. Caroline could shout into the wind, but the walls of my house now carried only truth. Later that week, Daniel came by while Caroline was at a strategy meeting. He wandered the living room like a man searching for something. On the coffee table sat Sam's sketchbook, left open to the page with the glass. Daniel paused, fingers brushing the edge. He bent down, really looking for the first time. His breath caught. He turned another page and found the folded letter I had tucked into the album. He opened it, read in silence, then closed his eyes. I stayed in the kitchen doorway, watching him wrestle with himself. I saw his shoulders tighten, then sag. When he finally looked up, his eyes met mine. He walked to the threshold of the kitchen but stopped short, as if the wooden frame were a border he wasn't sure he had permission to cross. "Mom," he said, voice breaking, "I don't know if I'm more afraid of losing face or losing you." For the first time in years, the mask fell away. I set down my towel and faced him. "You don't have to lose either, Daniel, but you have to choose truth over pride." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry for everything, for not stopping it, for letting Sam carry the hurt." It was not a perfect apology, but it was real. At that threshold, I saw my son again. Not the man Carolyn sculpted, but the boy who used to run home for dinner. And in that moment, hope flickered. When Daniel left that evening, quieter but lighter, I knew it was time to seal the boundary I had drawn. I sat with Caroline at the dining table, a folder of papers between us. My voice was calm, even. "Caroline, I want to be clear. I love my son, and I wish you well. But I will not share my home with contempt. That ends now." She bristled, as if preparing for a fight. But I didn't raise my tone. Instead, I slid the written agreement across the table, an orderly plan for moving out, with dates and times. The language was direct, but not cruel. I had no interest in humiliating her, no hunger for revenge. "This isn't about punishment," I said gently. "It's about peace. You'll have until the end of the week to remove your belongings. Daniel can coordinate with you. I'll respect your privacy, and I expect you to respect mine." Her lips tightened, searching for leverage, but found none. I didn't list her failures, didn't sling accusations. I simply folded my hands and waited. Silence carried more weight than anger ever could. In that moment, I realized the truest revenge was not destruction, but dignity. Graceful severance meant I could walk away with my head high, knowing I had honored myself without tearing others down. Caroline would leave, but my home would remain whole. The morning Caroline packed the last of her boxes, the air felt unusually still. I stood at the window, watching her car back toward the curb. But I wasn't alone. Nora from the thrift store arrived with 2 other widows, each carrying something sweet: a bundt cake, a plate of lemon bars, a tin of cookies. "We thought you might need company," Nora said with a soft smile. We set the treats on the counter, poured coffee, and let conversation fill the kitchen. Laughter rose here and there, not sharp or mocking, just warm and steady. Caroline came in for another load, her eyes flicking over the group. She froze for a moment, realizing she was being witnessed. Not in judgment, but in quiet solidarity that she couldn't buy or bend. No one scolded her. No one needed to. The sight of women gathered around me, women who had survived loss and rebuilt lives, was enough. They didn't defend me with words, but with presence. It was a kind of power Caroline had never touched. Love freely chosen, loyalty not bound by blood or control. As she drove away, I felt no triumph, only release. I turned back to the table where Sam was sketching Nora's laugh lines, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with lemon sugar in the air. My house was lighter now, not because someone left, but because true community had stepped in. That day, I understood. Family is not only inherited, it is witnessed. And sometimes, the most powerful testimony is simply people showing up, holding space, and reminding you that you are not alone. That first evening after Carolyn left, the house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had taken a long, needed breath. No sharp heels striking the hardwood, no tension humming under every word. Just the clatter of forks against simple plates. Just me and Sam at the table. Daniel stopped by briefly, his eyes still tired but softer than before, and he kissed my cheek before leaving us to our quiet. I had roasted chicken with herbs from the little garden patch, mashed potatoes whipped smooth, and peas bright with butter. It wasn't a feast, but it felt like one because peace sat with us. Sam ate slowly, as if savoring more than food. After dishes, I pulled out the family album, the one with yellowed pages and sleeves clouded by years. Sam turned to the page of his mother, my late daughter, her smile frozen but alive in that way. Photographs always lie and tell truth at once. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the delicate necklace that had once belonged to her, and placed it gently across the photo. "I think she'd want it here," he whispered. I felt my throat tighten. She would. And she'd want you to know you never have to ask for a place, Sam. You belong. Always. His eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw both the boy and the young man he was becoming. The necklace gleamed faintly under the lamp, turning that album page into a full circle, past and present touching, pain and healing braided together. That night, the house was still, but not lonely. It was whole. A month later, Sam's artwork hung in the school district's spring exhibition. Children's sketches and paintings lined the gym walls, but his stopped me cold. A boy standing at a doorway, hand on the knob, golden light pouring in around him. The shadows behind were deep, but his face tilted toward brightness. I stood back, letting others admire it first. Parents murmured, teachers nodded. Then I saw Daniel come to stand just behind me. His eyes fixed on the drawing, then on Sam, and I saw the red-rimmed edges of shame and pride mixing together. He didn't speak, but the way his shoulders bent and then straightened told me everything. He was beginning to see. As Sam pointed out details of the drawing to a friend, I felt my own words rise inside me, not spoken aloud, but narrated deep in my chest. Family is the place where you are seen, truly seen. The weeks had carried their consequences. Caroline slipped quietly out of the extended family group chat. Word spread she'd taken a small apartment on the other side of town. My home, once heavy with hidden debts and louder silences, was calm. Daniel visited more, bringing small bags of groceries, trying to mend step by step. But the truest rebirth came through Sam's art. It wasn't just paper and paint. It was testimony. That boy at the threshold wasn't only him. It was me, too. It was all of us who had ever waited at a closed door, wondering if we belonged, and then decided to open it ourselves. In the glow of the exhibition lights, surrounded by children's laughter, I felt something steady take root. We had survived. And more than that, we had begun again. After the exhibition, I met once more with Edgar, my lawyer, and made a quiet adjustment to my trust. A small portion would now go toward a scholarship through Nora's thrift store, carrying my daughter's name. It wasn't grand, but it was a seed, something that would help another child be seen, the way I once promised to see Sam. I also wrote a letter, in my own careful hand, sealed and tucked away in the album for Sam to read when he turns 18. In it, I told him everything I sometimes struggle to say out loud, that he is not less, that he never has to prove his place, that belonging is his birthright. A week later, I walked into the little diner near our neighborhood. I had passed it many times, always with someone else's order in mind. But that day, I walked in just for me. I bought a slice of pie, cherry, my favorite, and sat in the booth by the window. No celebration, no candles, just me eating slowly, tasting every bite. It felt like a declaration, a quiet claim of my own life. I could choose joy without permission. As I dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Mom, can I come for dinner tomorrow night?" My heart softened. The door wasn't fully closed. Maybe healing could take its time. Before we part, I'd like to ask you, the ones listening, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, in healing, and in second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, silence is not weakness. Sometimes the miracle doesn't knock. It waits quietly until we are ready to open our hearts. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.